You should now, there it is on the screen. I'm Frøydis Hamre. I work as a product owner at itslearning in our main office in Bergen, Norway. Well, home office in Bergen, Norway at the moment. Today we've had the English session teaching in the room next door, and my husband's doing his development planning session in the room behind me. So it's an interesting situation. I currently manage two of our projects, the test tool and our reports. I've been with itslearning for more than 6 years. And before that, I worked as a teacher in upper secondary school here in Bergen, teaching chemistry, science, and maths. As a teacher, itslearning was my main tool for digital interaction with my students, and I've seen an amazing development in this platform since I started using it just over 14 years ago. A development I'm now proud to be part of. The past 8 months, we've seen an unprecedented change in education. Never before have so many students spent so much of their school day online and not in a physical classroom or lecture hall, together with their peers and teachers. The effort, creativity, and engagement we have seen teachers deliver has been simply amazing. And overnight, Norway, we are back to a somewhat more normal school life, but every now and then a teacher or a class are put in quarantine, and some of our higher education institutions have yet again closed their campus for on-site teaching. On the other hand, we have customers who already this summer decided that schools would not open in August, and who are now doing everything remotely and online. As a teacher, you interact with your students on a daily basis. You talk to them, discuss problems, help them with their assignments, engage in various activities to help them learn. Every time you interact with a student, you learn where they're at. Did Anna understand the quadratic equation you just explained? Is John ready for some more challenging exercises? Ben hasn't been as engaged as usual lately. Maybe it's time for a chat about his family situation. You know your students. You can see it in their faces when they completely drop off your explanations, and the joy when they finally crack those German grammar rules. So now what? How can you know how they're doing when you don't see them eye to eye every week? I asked my team of developers for input as I was preparing for this presentation, and they said it's very important to include cute kittens to engage your audience. Not sure if this is a nerd thing or not, but just to make sure, cute kitten it is. I'm going to focus on two parts of our toolbox, tests and 360-degree reports. Hopefully, you'll get some tips and ideas to help you and your students keep learning going and raise education quality. I'll be talking about tests, but I mean that in every sense of the word, from entertaining quizzes and small polls via chapter summary tests to exam preparations. The screenshots I've used are all taken from the new version of our test tool. Some of you might have already seen this. Some have actually only seen this, while others have not. This will be enabled for everyone around the end of this year, while the current tool will still be available for some time to allow you time to get to know the new tool before abandoning the old. While digital or online tests may not have the same validity as formal summative testing in a remote learning situation, they could partially replace the everyday interaction between teacher and student. Digital tests are still, and maybe even more so, a valid tool for informal, formative testing. Assessments with the goal of helping the students learn. In addition, a digital, automatically scored test gives students immediate feedback and makes it very easy for the teacher to track their progress. And of course, they are easy to reuse. So once they're made, using them again only requires you to copy them, and then you're ready to go. Time saved. So, in what situations could you use a test? You could use an entry point to learn what students know before you start a new topic. You could create an exit ticket, a small quiz at the end of the lesson to summarize learning, maybe just a single question to reveal common misunderstandings. It could be a practice test open for endless attempts to help students memorize facts. test can be formative or summative, or even a formal exam. Now let's get you going. I want you to think about a topic that you're going to teach next week. Just one. You don't have to make a big thing here. What would be useful for you to know about your students' knowledge before you plan your lesson? Create 2 simple questions. As an example, if I'm teaching about the periodic table, I would ask questions to reveal if they had heard about periods and groups of elements before. I know they should have learned this, but that's not the same as them knowing it, and what they know affects where I should start. Next is the exit ticket. This is a small but very useful exercise you could do in several ways. In the classroom, I've often done this by having my students simply write on a small post-it and hand it to me at the door as they leave. But you could easily also do this digitally. Think about a topic you taught last week. Create 1 question that would reveal if anyone has misunderstood a concept where students commonly go wrong. As an example, if we had talked about acids, I would ask my students to explain the difference between a strong and a weak acid in 1 sentence. This would tell me a lot about their understanding of the concept, and I would know if I need to repeat with the whole class or simply have a discussion with a couple of students. So 1 topic you taught last week, create 1 question to reveal the student's status after that. Just keep it simple. Asking 1 question, you will learn a lot more than asking none. When thinking about digital tests, multiple choice is often the first thing that comes to mind, but there are other options available. And in addition to those already shown here, we're working on a new question type as we speak called Select Point. This is known as Hotspot Click the Picture in the current version of our test tool. The old one was based on outdated technology, and at the end of 2020, this will no longer work as the technology is deprecated from the supplier. I'll quickly show you a few examples of other question types to get your creativity going. My first example is a match question for memorizing foreign language vocabulary, here in English and German. You could use an order question to practice the order of mathematical operations, presenting the students with an expression and asking them to order the operations they would take to resolve it. And then you have select from a list. This is great to recall facts in a context. In this example, I've asked the students to recall the various atomic models through time, related to the researcher who came up with them and what experiment they did. Now I want to take it up a notch. I'll stick with something I have successfully used in my own teaching. Building good tests, and especially bigger tests, takes a lot of time. Don't get bogged down thinking you have to do it all at once. That could be overwhelming. This example illustrates an excerpt from a test I built over the course of 4 years, adding questions every time I started the topic with a new class. After that time, I had 230 questions spread across 9 categories, so a bit more than what you can see on the screen. I used this for teaching students to name inorganic compounds, a topic which basically involves memorizing names and rules. For those of you who are already using this version of the test tool, you'll notice that this Categories tab is not available. We are in the final stages of testing this, and I expect it to be available within the next few months. The test I made draws about 25 questions when a student starts it, different every time. I let them have unlimited attempts, and after about 3 weeks, I made a copy of that test with only 1 permitted attempt, and let that be the final test for the topic. Those that had taken the practice tests many times usually excelled at the final test, obviously, because they had then repeated and memorized it. In this example, I let a category be a specific topic. So here I had 1 for naming the elements based on the symbol, 1 for naming polyatomic ions, one for simple ionic compounds, and so on. A category could also be a level of difficulty, making sure all students get a test with the same distribution of difficulty in the questions, and so on. By using categories, you automatically set the score of the question. This page gives you an overview of how many questions you have in each category, how many will be drawn, and the total score each student can get in that category. Using categories and random draw is also a great way of increasing the security of a test when done remotely, as each student gets their individual version of the test. Combined with navigating forward only, this dramatically limits their ability to collaborate during the test, as they're all looking at different questions. I'll just quickly go into the test. 2 seconds. There we go. I'll just show you where those settings are. This is a different test, but you can see the question list here, and I would set random order, and I would make sure that they can navigate forward only, which means they can't go back to a previous question. Some questions like order, match, and select from a list have the answer alternatives randomized by nature. In the new version of the tool, we have added an option to randomize also in either or and in multiple choice questions. For those relying on the current tool for some time yet, you will actually get this option too in our next update. We generally don't work on the current tool anymore, but we made an exception for this option. So if I go into my multiple choice, I can now see that I can allow randomizing of the alternatives. We also offer a test mode browser, or lockdown browser as it's also called, as an add-on to our platform. This browser is made by our partner Respondus, who are doing a great job of making it as hard as possible to cheat on digital tests. In short, this locks the student computers to a special browser, prohibiting them from accessing any other software. It also prevents them from surfing the web for answers, but still allows you to link to a web page for them to read. For those of you using our current test tool, you may know there is also an option of password protecting the test. This allows you to assign the test to all your students, but only those having the password will actually be able to start it. We will be adding this feature to the new version too, although I don't want to make a promise of when we'll be able to deliver it. I try not to make promises I can't keep, so for now I'll stick to promising that we will deliver it. If you have students who are mature enough to follow a self-paced plan, tests can be used as part of a learning path where you structure the material and students go through it in their own pace. A small test can be used to evaluate if the student is ready for more complex content, or if they should spend some time on easier exercises first. By putting the test in the learning path, the next step can be determined automatically based on test results. Creating questions together with the students also helps them think about the material in different ways. A good multiple choice test has good distractors. Distractors are the answer alternatives that are not correct. To create good distractors, you need to understand in detail not only what is the correct answer, but also what are the common mistakes and misunderstandings. Let your students create questions individually or in groups. Discussing good answer alternatives is a great way to learn. Afterwards, you can collect the questions into a test to be used in class. This way, they all know some questions, and they get a sense of both ownership and mastery. For a particularly challenging group of students, maybe someone who doesn't really love your subject, try to turn the test around. Challenge them to fail. This requires a lot of your test, but it can also serve to prove the point that to get nothing right, you actually still need to know what is right and wrong. With carefully crafted distractors, getting everything wrong can be just as difficult as getting it right. Of course, they can always blame the cat. Through tests, students can get immediate feedback on what they've learned, and teachers can get immediate feedback to impact their teaching. Regular practice tests, quizzes, and other activities that require students to bring content to mind strengthens memory and improves learning. There are a lot of opinions, but also good research on use of tests in education. Continuous formative testing has the benefit of making tests less scary and more normal procedure, and it also continues to engage the students throughout the year instead of allowing them to sail through the year and then cram for the final exam. So, once you have some good tests to use before, during, and after working on a topic, how do you track this in combination with other work the students are doing to get a holistic view of their overall status? This is where our 360-degree reports come in. They are built to follow up what is going on in your course or mentor group. You can easily keep track of student progress, gain insight into study habits, time spent, logins, and so on. But you can also give students access and thus ownership of their own information. So before we start, spend half a minute thinking about what you would like to know about your students, their interaction with the course material, and so on. What's valuable to you, whether you see them in the classroom every week or you're teaching remotely. Again, ideally, I would have you discuss this with the person next to you, but hopefully giving it some thought by yourself is also helpful. I'll walk you through the reports to show you what information is available. Note that some of this might depend on settings. For instance, reports can be enabled or disabled, and showing time spent is not enabled in all markets, as there are different restrictions on dealing with that type of personal information. The data material is made up of interactions both in the web solution and in the mobile app. So first of all, I want to show you the settings available for you, granted that everything is turned on for your school or district. Go into your course, and then to your course settings, to the course properties and features, and then when you scroll down a bit, you can see the settings for the 360-degree reports. So there are 3 reports here available for you: activity, progress, and grades. And you can enable the same reports for the students. Students can, of course, only see their own information. They cannot see anything related to their peers. When you open 360-degree reports in a course, the first you see is the activity report. This gives you a general impression of student engagement with a count of active students, the average duration of their course visits. A course visit is defined as showing content from the course on the screen. Please note that this is not the same as students actually spending time interacting with the course, as they may be watching Netflix on their phone at the same time. We track access every few minutes and only record time apparently spent within itslearning, not work going on in other tabs, windows, or programs, as this is information that's not available to us, and it shouldn't be. Clicking on a specific student here will give you a more detailed view for that student. You can find the average duration of their visit. You can find the number of visits per day and the total number of those. There's a heat map showing activity over a full year. So, of course, when you start a new course, there's not going to be much here, and the values here will vary a lot for the first weeks until it kind of stabilizes. That's normal. But then over time, as students interact and you build more information, you will also get more out of these reports. Note also that there are two toggles, one for swapping between duration and visits in the top graph here, and the other to swap between duration and actions taken in the bottom one. You can get an impression of that person's engagement distributed over time. And scrolling down, didn't have place for it in the slide here, you also get an impression of their involvement in communication. So this is measured by interactions in discussions and comments made to announcements in the course. In the top right, as a teacher, you can find a drop-down list to quickly jump to another student. There's no need to go back and forth. And please note that if the student is currently online at the same time you're watching this and visiting your course, the numbers involving today may be a bit off. For technical reasons, the information about ongoing sessions can fluctuate. They will stabilize after the session is ended. This is perfectly normal. The second report is the progress report. This looks at if the students have visited course resources and completed the activities you have assigned. Note that you can also filter by course group or search for a particular student if you have a lot. It's also worth noticing that the progress report includes all activities, unlike the assessment record or gradebook that excludes activities that are not added to the assessment record. So you will find activities here that are not graded. Going to the details for a student, again, you can, for instance, in a glance, see if he or she generally hands in their work on time or late. You can also see a complete list of the course elements and how that student has interacted with them. Looking at the time spent here, again, we only measure the time something is shown on the screen, not what's going on in the mind of the student. I recommend using this to get an impression. Don't interpret the time online as very exact measurements. They're not. They can only give you an indication and maybe serve as a basis for a conversation with a student if you see discrepancies from what you would normally expect. Next is a grades report. This is about activities that can be assessed, so mainly tasks, assignments, and tests. If average is used, this is also shown here, and you can check the overall trend in the class. You can filter by term and by assessment scale. The trend graph and overall average are based on elements that are added to the assessment record and includes both mandatory and non-mandatory activities. This also includes manual assessments, so columns added directly in the assessment record. Again, clicking a student gives you details for that student with the same options for filtering. When looking at the reports, you might want to let the student know they should pay attention to a special area. Maybe they missed a lot of assignments in a topic, or you see they are doing well and you want to send them a message to congratulate them on their efforts. Simply check the students you want to contact from any summary report and click the little paper plane icon to send them a message. This is also available in the individual view. Sorry, the quality of that screen recording was not great. Let me show you in real life instead. So this is my test site, which means the numbers here don't necessarily make sense, since I am not 12 different students logging in every day. So I would simply click students here, and I can click the little paper plane to send them a message. At the bottom of the list of reports, you can find the resources summary. I think that was missing in the screenshots before. Just let me show you that. So here, this is our summary. Again, my test course doesn't really look great. This will give you somewhat the same information as the progress report, but with a more detailed focus on elements instead of students. So you can find the overall status for all your course elements here, with visited or completed status, an estimation of the total time spent, and some details. So if you click on the View Details, you open a page with a status for all students for that particular element. And note that we are working on some enhancements on the summary page here, as we've had feedback that the information is not intuitive enough. So we'll make it a bit easier to understand. This report is, for instance, an easy way of tracking all the tests you will be making in the next weeks and months. So instead of having to click through them in folders or from the planner, you can simply go here and find them all. This way, you can get an overview in very few clicks. Please note that the amount of information going into these reports is huge. So in order to keep them performing right, we've had to make some restrictions when the list of participants exceeds 600. Mostly this affects aggregated information. So you would, for instance, not see the full list of students with their information, but you can still search for individual students to get their details. To further enhance options for self-monitoring and self-regulation, we allow you to enable the 360 reports for your students, as I showed you in the settings at the beginning. This way, they can see the same reports you can see, but of course only with their own information, not that of other students. How this benefits students is also related to culture. Students are not necessarily trained in looking at this type of reports. They need to learn how to seek out information. By spending 10 minutes going through this in class, you are helping them to an insight into their own progress. Don't expect them to find this and see the benefit by themselves, but guide them in using this to monitor their work and engagement. When they know that they have access to the same information as the teacher, it builds trust. Lastly, we also recently added an option for course teachers to get weekly notifications from the reports with a short summary of student engagement for the past week. To get these, go to the reports and enable this option that you find. We are not sending out notifications by default. You have to opt in to receive them. So we don't drown people in messages they don't want. We've also made 360-degree reports available for mentors. You can find them in the mentor menu. I'll show you that here. So this, of course, requires you to have set up mentors and students for your school. But here you can find 360 reports. And as you see, instead of looking at one course and all students, you're now doing the opposite. I'm looking at one student, but I'm looking at all her courses. Again, my test site is not exactly amazing when it comes to data. I'm sorry about that. I have the same reports available here. I have her activity, her progress, and also her grades. Especially if I select a term with actual grades in it. There we go. So this is collecting across courses, focusing on one student at a time. While what's going on in the courses is you focus on the course for all students. But you can also switch here and watch courses instead. So you switch them around. With, of course, searches to find. If you have long lists, it might be difficult to find the one you're looking for. Now, I hope you have not all fallen asleep, but found some great options for tracking and following up with your students, even if you no longer see them in the classroom as often as normal. itslearning is a great platform to help you through this very weird year. But as a former teacher, I know you all want to go back to meeting students every day. Nothing beats the feeling of watching students learn and grow. Thank you.